Thank you all for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikasa Sukasa. I am here with Fiorella of the Convo Couch. Thanks for coming on, Fee. I appreciate it.
Hey, how's everyone doing? How you doing, Niko?
Doing pretty well. I can't complain. Been busy. You know how it goes.
A lot going on.
Heard y'all been busy too. You and Craig, or as many of you all know him as Pasta. By the way, we call him Pasta because he's basically an Italian grandmother. He doesn't cook Italian food for people. That's basically his solution to everything is cook.
He is, and both Ron Placone and I refer to him as our Italian grandmother because he acts accordingly like an Italian grandmother.
Yeah. So briefly before we get started, how you all went to the Bernie Sanders not concert? Good guy, it's like a concert, but the rally in UCLA. How was that?
It was good. It's actually very different this time because Bernie is, as all of you know, going to different cities and pretty much doing a very similar introductory speech. Like, this is where we left off. This is where we're going now. This is where we're going to go in 2020. We're continuing the revolution. He uses very similar rhetoric each time he goes. But this time it was more along the lines of being in solidarity with union workers and standing with them, precisely because it is very important in a big city like LA, where there's so much going on, like the teachers' rallies, like unions constantly, that someone like a presidential candidate stops and goes and stands in the picket line and supports union members. Basically, the UCLA workers are being not being paid well. They're not getting any benefits. And this is like the janitors, like the people that do the hardcore grunt work. And they're obviously unionized, so they're working with other unions, with AFSCME local, and they are basically just wanting job security. They're wanting simple things that UCLA isn't giving them,
which is only crazy because if you don't know, UCLA is one of the most like financially successful colleges in the world, really.
Yeah. And it's a public university too. And not only are they not giving them the basics, but they're also replacing them by outsourcing their jobs and hiring people that they can pay less. So they're
outsourcing in what way?
Hiring other people that aren't unionized to pay them.
I didn't even know you could do that when there's a union present. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's what they're doing. And so, they were pissed. So Bernie was there standing with them. He did a really short, like 15-minute 20-minute speech. He was in and out, and it's just really important.
So basically, he made sure not to make it about him, is what it sounds like.
Yes, he said, "I'm not here as a presidential candidate. I am here as someone that's stood with unions for years and that's standing with workers today." So that's what he said.
That man, Bernie, that guy, he all right.
He all right. Like, where's Beto at? You know,
right? Beto's hey, there might be a lawsuit on your hands. You bring Beto, he gonna hit somebody in the crowd. Oh God, I don't like that guy.
Did you see the picture with all the people looking at him like?
Oh yeah, with the straight face, like, man, we are not a bunch of desperate housewives who are looking for a quick,
Yeah, we want a progressive, not a Republican.
We got healthcare problems, bruh. So we got time for that pretty smile that you claim is pretty.
They weren't playing. Yeah,
I'm curious. Like, just as a total aside, before we get started, why is it that people think Beto is attractive? I'm confused. I'm more than willing to admit when a male is attractive. I have no problem with doing that, but I don't feel like Beto is on the attractive side. Maybe you can.
No,
I'm not crazy.
I don't get it. I don't either. I mean, I think maybe because he played the guitar, that often gets women, and he rode a skateboard, and he seems, comparatively to the other politicians like Biden and all these other weird looking politicians, like, he seems decent, but like, I never found him attractive. I don't think he's dreamy. And I find Bernie, like, dude, I'm like in love with Bernie just because of like his actions, and the things he says. And like, he wore a hat the other day, and I'm like, damn, Bernie, you're so cute. But like, that's because he's a progressive and he's actually doing shit. Like, I really don't get the whole Beto thing.
Yeah, see, like, and for me, as far as attractiveness is concerned, there is not a more attractive candidate to either sex than Tulsi. And so it's kind of weird when you hear the establishment basically, well, when they try to, they don't do it overtly, but they try to basically imply like Beto's a pretty young candidate. Like everybody should like him because he's beautiful and young. And I'm just like, bro, I'm pretty sure that Tulsi got a lot of her initial support like during this election because people looked at her and were like, I don't know what she's about or what she does. She could be Hitler reincarnated, but she is gorgeous and I'm voting for her. Like, so
which is yeah, and but it's also a problem because then people just were like trying to dismiss her, especially women. We're trying to be like, oh, who's she? Like really like
I'm not
salty.
speaking on that. I'm not speaking on that.
I'm speaking on it, and I'm just like, there's so much.
I'm gonna let you speak on that. I'm not saying that there's some jealous people out there. I'm not saying that there's some jealous people out there, but there are a few.
There are, and they're constantly attacking her because they wish they were her. And it's like, okay, guys, like I get it.
It's mostly from what I've seen, the younger people. Like there's like an irrational, exactly. Like there's a rational disdain for her and the success she's gained at such a young age. And really, Tulsi is definitely like wise beyond her years. On top of that, she's only 37. She just turned 37, if I recall. So like that's young. Like, and for her to be, and for those of you who don't know, the way the hierarchy goes, she's potentially going to be a lieutenant commander here in the next year. Like being 37, 38 years old and being a light colonel, which is like the flower, but not the bird. That's a big deal. And especially when I think she would be doing it in less than 20 years, which is once again, another big deal. So very, very much so achieved. So let's go ahead and get on with this breaking news that just dropped today. So MoveOn.org reported something this morning that was kind of surprising to me, and we'll get into the details about why that's surprising in a second. I want to go to this tweet by MoveOn. So basically, they said that, hold on, I got to go to my bookmarks. So MoveOn.org said that 74% of their members asked candidates to skip the AIPAC conference, right? And they went on to list several reasons. The reasons included, war crimes committed by AIPAC, or not AIPAC, excuse me, but by Israel and its leaders. AIPAC actually elevating bigoted people who are pretty clear about their lack of desire for a two-state solution. And the fact that just overall money in politics has become a big deal. Now, this announcement by MoveOn, like I said, 74% of their members have said that they do not want their candidates going to the AIPAC conference in any capacity. Which is a good thing, right? That's a good thing. Yeah. But there are a lot of there's two sides to this coin. The first side would be, which I think we should acknowledge, this is Ilhan Omar's doing, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think that it's her having this conversation, her being willing to put herself on the line, not only her, but Rashida Tlaib as well, being able to put herself on the line and say, look, these are the facts. I mean, we can try and dress them up however we'd like to. You can throw as many homophobic, Islamophobic insults at me as you would like, but these facts still remain, and the people are going to hear about it. And she even said that she welcomed the idea of being, if it helps elevate her message, she doesn't mind being attacked. She'll handle it how she handles it. So what do you think about the idea that even though we, the progressive, the independent progressive community has been talking about AIPAC's influence, it is interesting that this didn't start getting the national attention that it has, the mainstream national attention that it deserved until Ilhan spoke up about it. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think Ilhan has literally lit an entire flame on this discussion because MoveOn specifically cited as one of their number 2 reasons that AIPAC has been known to peddle anti-Muslim and anti-Arab rhetoric while giving platforms to those involved in human rights issues, which is very hypocritical of them to do so. So MoveOn is pointing this out because people have gathered in support of Ilhan. People have been vocalizing, donating money to her throughout this entire time. And I don't think the Democrats expected that. I don't think MoveOn expected that. I don't think a lot of these organizations, including AIPAC, expected that. And what Ilhan has started is other people have been putting themselves on the line on her behalf. And it's important to note that MoveOn is actually being really smart right now It's a very strategic move to go and support anti AIPAC kind of connotations by telling people not to attend, because
why do you say that?
Because it's unpopular to do so now. Like the idea, progressivism has become a sort of trend now. So a lot of Democrats, establishment Democrats, are not only copying Bernie Sanders, but they're copying the entire progressive movement. You saw with Beto O'Rourke how they're trying to paint him as a grassroots candidate, even though we know that's not true. But that's what the Democratic Party as a whole is doing. So anybody who's even if they aren't really progressive, if they are smart, they're going to support a progressive agenda, at least in the forefront.
So you feel like this is mostly Move On being opportunistic?
I think there is a sense of opportunism in there. I am still going to give them props for doing it, because AIPAC is such a powerful influence, and they have so much money, and they spent tens of millions of dollars in pretty much like defeating kind of progressive agendas like the Iran nuclear deal with Obama. They've also spent a lot of money defending Benjamin Netanyahu, who's extremely powerful. So I still will give props to Move On for standing up to such a powerful organization.
Absolutely. Well, and before we continue, I just want to say, if you're watching this video right now, make sure you like it and subscribe it. Subscribe to the channel. We talk about issues like this all the time. We are progressive, but we are objective. You know, we try to tell it like it is. And definitely, if you have not yet, Fee, what's your Twitter? While everybody,
my Twitter is Fiorella Isabel.
So FIORELLA _ or is it all one word?
It should be all one word.
So FIORELLAISABEL.
Yes.
Boom.
That's my Twitter.
Just kidding. I suck at spelling. But so I agree with you. I think that Move On is capitalizing, right? Because it should be said, Move On has not necessarily been on the right side of the issue when it comes to a lot of different things. Move On, in my, now this is just me trying to remember all the emails that I've gotten from them, which I actually don't know how I got all the emails from them, because I didn't even sign up for Move On. But somehow, some way, they end up emailing me all the time. They push for the ACA regularly. And in fact, you can see that. So instead of Medicare for all, which we know most of the country agrees on, they're still advocating for ACA. You know, but that's weird, because Medicare for all is just as popular as not being beholden to AIPAC. Move On has also got it wrong when it comes to supporting particular candidates. They've pushed the Russiagate stuff at times. You know, they've basically been, for the most part, blue no matter who. So I think that this is actually a bigger victory than what most people may consider it as. So in case, I want to pull this up real quick, in case you all don't know who has already quote unquote pledged not to go to the AIPAC conference, Senator Warren has said she's not going to go to the conference. Senator Harris said she's not going to go to the conference. Buttigieg, Buddha, I don't know. Booty, Rocket.
People have been making fun of his last name, so yeah.
No idea what it is. I know he's like the young guy they're trying to push in front of him, you know, in front of Bernie now. But he said he's not going to go. Obviously, Sanders is going to go. Julian Castro isn't going either. Nobody cares what Julian Castro is doing, but I felt like it was fair to still say it. And given Tulsi's recent tweet about Trump and Netanyahu's love affair, I doubt she's going as well. She's been pretty outspoken. She's been a pretty outspoken critic about AIPAC, and AIPAC has made it clear that they are going to do everything they can to undercut her. So I'm pretty sure. And by the way, first one, she was the first candidate that the Israeli lobbyists came out against since the primaries have been kicked off. So I just want everybody to know that, because there's this weird thing that people think that she's going to support Israel. And I guess because, like most other candidates in the past, because of misinformation and lies, she was like, you know, she thought that the Israeli people were the ones under the attack, and it turned out to be the other way around. So, so that's a pretty, I mean, it's like Medicare for all, right? If they have to lie about not wanting to go or about not working with AIPAC, it means the activists are winning. Right? I mean, that's what I would take it as. If they have to lie, they basically have to say, I'm not going to, like, so for example, Kamala Harris has already got caught secretly meeting with AIPAC.
Right.
Because she already knows how unpopular they are. but she has to have her campaign make a statement that she's not going to go. Senator Warren already met with. She was like avidly defending, not Netanyahu specifically, but
the organization.
Yeah, but she was defending the Israelis, and I think she had even piled on to Ilhan Omar, but not without directly mentioning her. Sanders has never gone to AIPAC. In the speech that he was going to give last in 2016, he was going to go. He was going to go to the AIPAC conference, but it wasn't going to be the speech that they was
which would have been awesome if he did that too.
Boy, they were like, well, what do you want to say? He was like, here's my speech. They were like, hell no, you can't come.
He shouldn't have given them the speech. He should have just lied and just done his thing.
Tulsi has been, just outspoken against Israel and Netanyahu specifically for the last 2 years. So, but Buttigieg is going. He's saying wherever the wind blows is where he's gonna go. But like I said, move on is not necessarily the guiding light for progressivism, right? We know Kamala Harris for the most part is full of it. We know Elizabeth Warren, even though she has good ideas, having some good ideas does not make you a great leader, right? That doesn't, and people need to be able to discern the difference between that. Just because Elizabeth Warren has 1 or 2 good ideas doesn't mean she's a good leader, doesn't mean she's going to hold people accountable. It doesn't mean she's going to do what needs to be done, because she's been put in situation after situation after situation where she had the opportunity to do what needed to be done, and she has not done so. We have bankers that went unprosecuted, even though she's supposed to be the warrior against Wall Street. Obviously, the tobacco last election. And all her advocation for Israel in the past, and her telling us that she's not only is she going to take corporate money, but she's going to do it with a smile come the general election. So like, she has a lot of flaws, but even her, despite her past loyalty to AIPAC, has come out spoken against this. So despite the fact that all these faux progressives and this kind of, I don't want to call it faux progressive, but this demi-progressive organization, is saying that you can't go to AIPAC, that lets us know one thing: pragmatism and the progressive movement are not mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
And once again, it's just like Medicare for all. Medicare for all 2 years ago, where were we at? 2014, it was a 34% approval across the country, and now it's at something close to 80%. So this lets us know, and lets me know, 1, Ilhan Omar deserves a lot of credit. 2, activism works.
It absolutely does. And it's like, even just Twitter defending Ilhan. And, because Nancy Pelosi, who is going to AIPAC, is one of those leading the charge against Ilhan and trying to replace her already. Like, they are avidly advocating to replace her. They are doing things in order to replace her. But Nancy doesn't realize. She thinks like she's all powerful, because she doesn't realize that her doing that is making her more unpopular by the second. And the House Democrats of the Jewish House Democrats basically are apologizing to their constituents for not being able to protect them from Ilhan Omar's rhetoric. That's how ridiculous this is getting.
Yeah, and Nancy Pelosi is already wildly unpopular, so there's that. And so she doesn't care, right?
Right.
She just wants to keep collecting checks regardless of what happens. But with Ilhan specifically, there were such brutal attacks, and the Democratic Party would have had, if it was up to them, they would have had the world believe that we stood, and the left stood with the Democrats on Ilhan's rhetoric, and instead of standing with Ilhan, which was not true. And like I said, if you know anything about Move On and their funders, for them to have even come out and said that 74% of their people were like, nah, we're with Ilhan. We don't like AIPAC. We don't support AIPAC. Their human rights atrocities. They're investigating, and Netanyahu still hasn't been taken to court for war crimes. This is damn near a consensus. This isn't like Syria, where it's like basically speculation and then it's proven false. Like, these settlements are ongoing. The innocent people who die in Israel is international news as long as your country is okay with exposing Israel. Otherwise, much of the things that happen in Israel gets shut off. Like the fact that they spread a disinformation campaign against the Ethiopians who were migrating there, saying that they were a bunch of rapists and they're consuming the streets and like, and it turned out that it was an utter lie. And once again, some news outlets covered this, but most did not. So a lot of the trials and tribulations that Netanyahu puts the Palestinian people through doesn't get covered. But in the international community, in the United Nations, even in the EU, there are plenty of people who speak out against Benjamin Netanyahu. But because of the control of the media, because of the military-industrial complex and the good, quote unquote, that Netanyahu does for the military-industrial complex, they protect him at every turn. And so I think that it's that. But once again, and this is once again a testament to just how influential the progressive movement has been over the last 2 or 3 years, where people kind of feel hopeless sometimes. And I'm not saying that the frustration doesn't build up in all of us, but think about this. The Democratic Party is they're lying. They don't believe in any of the thing Bernie Sanders believes in. They don't. Nope. Let's be clear. But they got to say they do. Why? Because they can't win. They can't even pretend. Like Hillary tried to pretend that she won her election legitimately. Nobody believed it. So they're like, shit, if we're going to steal the election, we better at least pretend like we agree with Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard, in the policies they advocate for, or else we're screwed. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, just like that whole thing, like even with the Bernie Sanders presidency, even with this not backing AIPAC, like it's clear progressives need to understand though that we are not necessarily pushing the Democratic Party left. We are pressuring them to pretend they're left enough. And you have to be able to know the difference. You have to be able to know that none of these candidates are actually Bernie Sanders, that the only candidate pushing such a strong anti-war, anti-interventionist foreign policy is Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders, even Tulsi more so than Bernie. You have to be able to differentiate now because they are going to try and pretend that they are all progressive. And it's kind of working with Warren because there are people that are like, oh, Warren, look, she's progressive in this, she's putting this out. But that's the thing, like, is she going to follow through? Are you confident that she isn't already in the pockets of these establishment type of organizations? Like, and you can't, and you're not. And that's the thing. It's going to be up to us to make sure we differentiate between what is real and what isn't, because now everybody's a Bernie, everybody's a progressive, and it's kind of lost meaning when people just throw the word out.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the idea of the FDR Democrat. And people try to say that they're FDR Democrats, but in actuality that they weren't. And then kind of Bernie Sanders brought that back to life. Funny enough, in the group chat that I'm in, we were talking about the untold legacy of Henry Wallace, who, for those of you who do not know, Henry Wallace was the vice president for FDR for 3 terms. In FDR's fourth term, when everyone knew that he was going to kick the bucket, basically, Henry Wallace was forced out. He was the VP pick. He was actually more popular internationally than FDR was. And that's saying something. Like, this man was, he was basically the younger version of what Bernie is today times 50. Like, he was way more progressive than Bernie on foreign policy. I'm talking about calling out our foreign policy at the time against Cuba, talking about what was happening in South Africa, he was the one who actually spoke out against the United States protecting British colonies in Africa during World War II. It's like, hold on, I thought we were going to war to protect our interests while we were protecting a bunch of British colonies. That was that guy. So then he got booted out because they cheated at the Democratic National Convention, ironically enough. Surprise, right? Because they knew Henry Wallace takes over. Oh God, this world looks infinitely different. And they knew this. But that once again goes, but with that being said, the Democrats rode the message of FDR while instigating neoliberal or neoconservative policies across the board.
And look where we are today. That was a pivotal moment in history.
Oh,
and it would have changed everything.
It's scary. The bombs, the nuclear weapons never get used on Japan. The country looks completely different. If Henry Wallace takes over, we never have the Cold War. If Henry
Exactly.
Wallace takes over rather than the idiot Harry Truman. The Dulles brothers never end up in what's director of the CIA and I believe Secretary of State, where they're influencing Truman and I think subsequently Eisenhower and a couple of others. Then that's how we end up ultimately creating extremist, quote unquote, extremist Islam. There's a book created in the Iranian subsidiary of Nebraska. Like that's where the idea of radical Islam came from, was from the University of Nebraska and a subsidiary in Iran, because Iran used to be our old Israel. So like so many things would not have happened if Americans had, well, not because it wasn't their fault for the most part, right? They have access to as much as they had access to. There's not really anything they can do about that, but it's different now. And they're going to try and co-opt the message at every single turn. And 50, 60 years ago, when Kamala Harris stood up in front of that crowd and lied and said she was 100% for Medicare for all, let me be clear. I want to be very clear about this. I am for Medicare for all. Healthcare is a right. And then her campaign guy comes out the next day and says, I mean, yeah, we're for Medicare for all, but we're for everything else also. Literally for everything else is what they said. So, but 60 years ago, we wouldn't have caught that. It's different now. And so now we get to corner them because our progressive policies, like speaking out against AIPAC, like Medicare for all, like public college, free public college, we corner them because these like the facts speak for themselves. So then they have to ride the coattails of the progressive movement. Then they'll say that they're for these particular items. But then what ultimately ends up happening is they get asked about it again. And then they're like, well, I mean, we're not really for this stuff. We're just kind of for it, but we're also for other options. But then now, because of the exposure that we have to the candidates, everybody knows when they've backtracked. Right. So they can say what they've said about AIPAC, right? They can speak out in the most like disingenuous way that we know they're going to. Like Senator Warren and Kamala Harris specifically are probably the most disingenuous out of the bunch as far as the Democrats are concerned. Because literally Kamala took a secret meeting with AIPAC like not even a month ago. Not even. Elizabeth Warren was preaching for AIPAC not even a month ago. Not for AIPAC, excuse me, for Netanyahu and the Israeli government not even a month ago. Mm-hmm. But now they have to pretend like they're not. And so once again, they're going to backtrack. And they're going to get caught. And then people are going to say, well, is there anyone who is willing to hold their word on what they said? And it's going to come back to, at this point, the same two candidates over and over again, Bernie and Tulsi.
Exactly. And beyond the popularity trend of progressivism, beyond the co-opting, of course, of the movement, is also the fact that they're scared. The Democratic establishment is terrified. They're looking at Bernie's numbers. They're reaching for a Beto. They're pushing for a Biden. Their last two cards that they have at play, they're going to tokenize Stacey Abrams as a potential VP for Biden. And they are reaching because they are terrified, entirely terrified of what is going to happen if a Bernie Sanders, our generation's Henry Wallace gets into power, and they are going to try everything they can. And they're also terrified because they know that the majority of America is in agreement that we need Medicare for all. The majority of America isn't just pushing because it's cool. The majority of America is at the point where they have no more room to be told the same corporate platitude bullshit. Even people that are not political. I stayed with a friend in Olympia, and her husband's in the military, and they were just talking about what they believe in, and they're not progressive, they're not leftist, but they agree that the government is full of shit. They don't trust the government. They agree that all pundits, CNN, Fox News, they're all full of shit too. So it's kind of like the general mass of people agrees that we can't really have this anymore. We can't trust the government. We can't, if we can't hold these people accountable, where are we? We have to take matters into our own hands. And so I think the establishment is slowly starting to see that, and they're terrified. And so they're going to do everything they can to scramble and throw all their cards out and make it look like they're actually changing. So I don't like it when, progressives go on there and they're like, see, we're pushing Democrats to the left. You're not pushing them to the left. you are literally dragging them to do what needs to be done only to make them themselves look good and appeasable to you.
You're pressuring them into convincing people that they've been pushed left. It's not the same thing as actually pushing people to the left.
You're pressuring them into submission. They're really not there with you.
I think a good example of actually pushing someone to the left would be Bernie Sanders. I think that he is being pushed to the left on Bernie's on foreign policy by Tulsi, because it's like, he is a friend of Tulsi. Obviously, he wants to see Tulsi be successful because, well, he's a friend once again, but also it's in his best interest for Tulsi to be successful at this point. And her foreign policy is basically one of common sense, right? I don't think that she says anything radical. Like when she says things like, I did a video today, I was talking about this. When she said something like, we fund Al-Qaeda, the rest of the world is like, oh my God, how could you say something like that? And I'm like, literally, this is like in an initial briefing before we get deployed, when we're learning about the people that we're dealing with. And like, if you're a veteran, we are taught as a matter of study and as a matter of fact, Osama is of the Saudi regime. He is part of the royal family. Saudi Arabia is our ally. Therefore, we worked for their interests and our mutual interests in the region by propping up people from their regime. And then, of course, that's how Osama came into power and Al-Qaeda was created. So we worked with them before and we funded them. The idea that it's crazy that we're still funding them now for our personal interests is not insane in the slightest. And once again, common sense. If you do your research, most of the world will probably agree with this. But because we've been so conditioned, Tulsi saying things like this, it's creating a buzz. And then people like Bernie, who are actually progressive, are forced to listen because foreign policy isn't his thing. Venezuela, the same thing. For the first time, we heard Bernie push back and say, no, we're not going to call Maduro a dictator. No, we're not going to advocate for United States United States specific aid. We're going to call for humanitarian aid internationally, but not United States specific, which shows that he may not understand everything about Venezuela because he's so focused on domestic policy, but it shows that he is listening. For him to add David Sirota and Brianna Joy Gray, it shows that he is listening. That is push. And whereas I'm not going to say everybody was establishment before, but 99% of his staff was establishment before. But to have your speechwriter and one of your chief advisors and then your national press secretary be the most anti-establishment that you could be, David Sirota being a strong advocate for Julian Assange, appearing on some of the vigils even, Brianna, and I think both Brianna Joy Gray and David Sirota advocated for and voted for Jill Stein. Like, that lets us know that there is something as legit. There is a such thing as being legitimately pushed left. Right. What's happening with these Democrats is not that, though.
And traditionally, the media, right? The media, the speechwriters, the press secretaries, the media, we are much more left than people who are in politics. And campaigns don't often realize that they do need to reach out to the grassroots, to the hardcore like leftists, and most of them don't. And the fact that Bernie's campaign is able to do that and is able to actually go and put someone like Brianna and someone like David onto the forefront. And I know you follow their Twitter and you know like how progressive they are, and that you're in constant agreement with the majority of the things they say. And it's really great.
I didn't mean to interrupt. We do have a super chat shout out from Gabriel Akari. He said, keep up the good work. Regards from Sweden. Man, you people in Sweden, y'all are so dope.
They're awesome over there, by the way.
But yeah, so no, but I 100% agree. I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, and with this AIPAC situation, I can't stress enough how much we can't be fooled. Right? I know this is crazy, and I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I guess we have to because of the way that people think. It's very Hegelian nowadays, which means it either has to be A or B. It can be a mixture of both. We can accept this as a victory, and we should, because that means our voices are carrying. Our policies and the things that we advocate for are important, and they're popular, and we're winning. Like, at the same time, it should also be acknowledged that when someone, was it Maya Angelou who said that? When someone shows who they truly are, believe them.
Exactly.
Right. So Kamala has shown, she set the record for putting Black people in jail. She's taken secret meetings with AIPAC already. Elizabeth Warren has advocated strongly in the past and only turned down meeting with AIPAC after this poll came out to show that it would be damn near political suicide to go to that conference. It was a no-brainer not to go to that conference. And to be honest with you, I want to be perfectly upfront. This is purely speculative. But from what I understand about politics, Move On, or the people from Move On, contacted the campaigns and was like, hey, 74% of our people said, don't do this. Don't do this shit. Come out with a statement. Because all these statements were coordinated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this poll came out, it's Thursday. This statement came out today, and already Warren, Harris, Buttigieg, and Sanders, who was never going to do it, but and Julian Castro all came out with statements saying they weren't going to go today, that quick. So that lets you know that this is probably a coordinated effort to make these candidates sound more progressive than they really are, because Move On, they're a barometer. They act as a barometer a lot of the times. And so when they're told, hey, this is unpopular, they're going to contact the candidates, because their whole thing is getting the neoliberal light candidates elected and getting us to be okay with neoliberal light policies. So we can do both things. We can say this is a victory because this means our voice is carrying. This means AIPAC is nationally and internationally unpopular. And people know now. It means that Ilhan has been vindicated, because that means what she said and what she has been saying is true, and that the attacks against her weren't substantiated. But on the other side of that coin, these people are now our allies. Just because they are advocating, at least nominally, for policies that we advocate for, or speaking against, at least nominally, things that we speak against, doesn't mean that they are our friends. It doesn't mean that they're going to be progressive. It doesn't mean that we can trust them. It doesn't mean that they've been, quote unquote, pushed left. It just means that they've learned how to mimic our rhetoric, and they're looking at even the most obvious polls to say, shit, it doesn't matter how we spin this. We have to say this, oh, we're screwed, like with Medicare for All.
Right. And there's nuance to a lot of things, right? That's happening in our movement right now. There's so much nuance, and we need to be able to understand, like, the nuance that you were just talking about. Like, we can take this as a win and say, good, we want this popular mainstream organization that's quote unquote progressive. We want them on our side. They do have some sort of influence, some sort of power, and it's great that they're doing this. However, just know that there is a reason why all of these candidates have come out and said they're not going. There's a reason why Move On has come out and said, we don't support AIPAC. There's a reason, there's a chronological order to the way things are happening, and we need to be smart and realize, like, okay, we're winning, we're doing great, we're winning, but let's not, back off. Let's not think we have it in the bag, because the moment we think that, they're going to start coming in. And that's what I don't like to see. A lot of people are like, why are you guys even focused on Beto? Why are you guys even talking about this? We got this. We're winning. Bernie's got this. He's a front runner. Yes, he's a front runner, but that doesn't mean they're not going to try every single thing at every single time to throw you off. And we can't ever let our guard down.
Yep. And with that being said, to close, basically, we can't ever get comfortable. Like, they're not good, right? Like, the establishment they're pretty stupid. They're pretty simple. They're really obvious in their tactics. But at the same time, the reason that a lot of the times that they win things is because they're diligent. For all the lack of intelligence and common sense that they have, they're diligent. They are organized. And they have obviously the money behind them. So with that being said, it's important for us to remain diligent, have our minds constantly working to try and preempt the establishment's tactics and strategies. Like I said, this thing with AIPAC is a clear example of we know how unpopular AIPAC is. Literally, even the establishment publications were like, yo, we can't even get with the Democrats or the Republicans on this shit, because this, like, if you go on Twitter, their overall barometer is, like, if you go on Facebook, go on Twitter, go on television, like, even the mainstream, even the establishments were like, look, dog, we tried to co-opt the narrative against Ilhan Omar, but like, AIPAC is wildly unpopular. And then with this attack, ironically enough, or I guess I should say conveniently enough, with this attack in New Zealand, all of a sudden this comes out. With how much, like, I mean, Chelsea got dismantled by Twitter, and everyone who tried to help her got dismantled by Twitter. Like, it don't take nothing. Like, you ain't got to say nothing slick to a can of oil. It's obvious. And so, but with that being said, we can't stop trying to think of all the ways that they're going to try and co-opt our message, that they are going to try and attack us next. And, we can't stop, being persistent about trying to figure out who the next Beto, who they're going to try, who they're going to try to make the next Beto, the next Buttigieg, the next Elizabeth Warren, because they're going to put a bunch of different flavors in front of us. But like, there's only one, like Ben and Jerry's, right? You can at the end of the day, and it's true, right? So they're gonna put all the flavors they want to. They're gonna call themselves Baskin Robbins. Cold Stone's pretty close now. Cold Stone is pretty damn close, but it ain't Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's has been around and doing this for a long time. Cold Stone, they do a lot of tricks. They even sing happy birthday to you. It looks really pretty, but it ain't Ben and Jerry's. It ain't that consistency. It ain't got the consistency of Ben and Jerry's. So with that being said, people, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment. Make sure that you like the video. Make sure that you subscribe. Make sure that you have the notification bells turned on. Follow Fiorella on Twitter at Fiorella Isabel. Or is it Isabella?
Isabel.
Isabel. See, I was right. Okay. So Fiorella Isabel. And more than anything else, always remember, people, find your balance. Peace.
Thanks, guys. Okay.